Alright, yo, my name is Krim, and I'm back with another Glooga video. So this is the indepth guide to vanilla Glooga, which is otherwise known as Vglooga. After picking this one up a couple months ago, and I started to realize how good it could be, I thought it would be really good for me to go over what makes it so strong, how to play it, and a lot more in this guide. But before I get started with this in detail, I want to go over a few terms I want to explain, just to keep everyone that watches this video on the same page, and just keep everyone informed. Alright, so the reason I want to take time to explain some terms before I get into the guide as a whole is that I want to talk about the three states of any given Splatoon match. Those are advantage, disadvantage, and neutral. And I really believe to understand the weapon in depth, it's important for pretty much everyone to know how you should be playing in these three states of the game. So first off, right off the bat, I'm going to start with advantage. Advantage is basically a state of the game where your team either has more specials, map control, or the other team in comparison to your own has 1 to 2 people down. And with these conditions being optimal for your team, it means you're in a good position to move up, take control of the map, and further push the objective, and start looking to KO, or start looking to get past, and like, if they have lead, for example, in Rainmaker or TC, or they have more clams than you, getting into advantage is a good way to just do objective and get that secured. So next up, I'm going to be talking about neutral. Neutral is a state of the game where you're not disadvantage or advantage yet. It's, and as the word itself says, neutral. You'll mostly be playing to get into advantage by getting a pick, getting map control, or using specials. But neutral itself is generally a state of the game where both teams are on even ground. People are either moving into the map, building specials, or starting to move towards objective and try to get a push into advantage. And last, but most certainly not least, I'm talking about disadvantage. Disadvantage is a state of the game where your team is either 1 or 2 players down, or actively pushed by the enemy team with specials and their bodies, or as it's going to end up being most of the time, both. Advantage is a really hard state of the game to get out of, even for people at high levels of play, but you basically have to back up to give space so you can breathe, get teammates, and then work to get specials to get out of it, and that generally works well. This will transition you back to neutral, or you can transition into advantage if you manage to use your specials to get picks on the enemy team. Alright, now that we have terms out of the way, I can start to get into the guide itself. And the first thing we're going to be touching on is the main stats of Glooga as a weapon. So I'm going to start off first with the roll distance. This roll distance is one of the longest roll distances between dualies. It's most comparable to CDS and Tetra. I would say it's around in the middle. With range, you're very close to both 96 and Pro to compare them to other two shooters. Like, you have a little less range of 96, and you're about equal to Pro. With your damage output, Glooga without MPU does 52.5 damage, and damage fall-off tends to be very, very poor. As you can just, with fall-off, you can land somewhere in the 30s or lower 40s with your damage, and that's not good. With paint, Glooga paints less thoroughly than most weapons in the game. It's not a very good painter. Comparing it to 96 and Pro, they both paint thoroughly than it, and even weapons like Squelchy and Tetra generally have a better paint output than Glooga does as a main weapon. Its paint output is very, very poor. Next up, I'm going to be talking about what makes Vglooga so good. In this section, I really want to be touching on both the main weapon, Inkmine, and Inkjet, and I'm going to start with Inkmine. Inkmine is a really great tool for baiting opponents into pushing you, and stepping on Inkmine will leave them damaged for at least a 35 minimum damage and a max of 45 damage. And if you choose to run at least a main of MPU, Glooga can boost its own damage to 55.6, which means you can combo with the 45 damage hitbox of Mine. And even if you don't hit the 45 damage hitbox, Inkmine is still guaranteed to break armor off of anyone who steps on the mine, and this can be really valuable if you're being pushed by people who have armor, or if you need to break enemy armors in teamfights and they're pushing your team and you have somewhere where you can hold out. Vglooga is also really good at selling checkpoints and tower control with a combination of Mine and Inkjet. If you're in advantage or even disadvantage, you can choose to double mine checkpoints or other areas of the map people want to push near the tower, and then bait them to push into you with those mines up, or if your teammates have to go down and they try to push on the checkpoint. Inkmine not only does damage to people that push near or on tower, but if you double mine under tower on checkpoints, it completely paints that person's feet and leaves them unable to move. Which is a great opportunity for your teammates to get picks or damage people on tower, and makes it much easier to land your own Inkjet shots. So I would say that if you want to play Vglooga on TC, keep this in mind, it's super duper helpful. And Mines and Inkjet have the same damage combo idea as Glooga and Inkmine. And like I said earlier, if you have other people with you, you can easily clean up people who choose to push tower or checkpoints, since they'll be chipped by both Mine and Jetpack. You'll know where they are for a period of time because Inkmine gives you info and marks people. and it's just super helpful for keep track of opponents and stopping pushes and stalling them out. Glooga as a main weapon is also incredibly mobile since it's a dually, and with its long roll distance compared to other dualies in its class, it means that it can close gaps a lot of weapons really can't without much trouble at all. And this roll distance also means you have a great option to back up or create space if you need to. Like, you can back up and roll away from opponents and then mine and then push back into them. It's a really good tactic. You can also mine areas that you've been pushed into, or areas that are behind you to bait people again to push towards you into Inkmines that decide to push you. And the combo of Inkmine and Jetpack with Glooga's mobility allows it to constantly apply pressure throughout pretty much every state of the game if it's played correctly. So you can always be doing chip damage, getting info, stalling with Inkmine and Inkjet, and just applying so much long-range pressure with your high mobility, high range, on top of Inkjet also being a high-range mobile special. While Vglooga does have a lot of really good upsides, it does suffer from a few weaknesses. Vglooga in particular really needs help getting set up from its teammates in order to start the snowball and the pressure that it's able to constantly apply, and if it doesn't get the chance to get set up by its teammates, or if it doesn't get let into the map, it'll really struggle to do much of anything. At that point with Vglooga, if you can't get in the map, you are really playing to bait people into mine traps or playing to get Inkjet to see if you can find a way to get back into the map, whether that's getting a pick or helping your teammates get a pick with your combination of chip damage info with mine and jetpack. Vglooga also values time in a match a lot, meaning that a team that gives it time to get set up so it can start skirmishing, pushing mines, and inkjetting will help it succeed really well in any given match. But if you don't give it that time to do that, then the weapon will again struggle to do much of anything, and lockout can be really hard for Vglooga to play out of if it isn't played correctly, since you have limited opportunities to get out of lockout with the weapon, and you're really relying on your teammates' paints and specials to get you back in so you can help do what you do best in skirmishing and applying constant pressure. I want to briefly touch on Inkmine in this guide, since when Vglooga has been talked about in the past, Inkmine has been talked about as one of the weaker parts of the weapon's kit, and I've heard a lot of people say that Inkjet is the only good part of the Vglooga kit, and I'm going to respectfully disagree with that opinion. Since Inkmine gives Vglooga chip damage, information on where the opponents are, and a small amount of paint once the mine explodes. But not only that, mine combos really well with the main weapon's damage and Inkjet's damage, and allows both Glooga and Inkjet to confirm easier kills. So if Glooga runs at least one main of MPU to boost its damage to 55.6, it can combo with the 45 damage hitbox of mine from turret mode, and it gets a guaranteed kill. Inkmine also really helps Vglooga deal with armored teams, as it can break armor guaranteed every time, and this means that it can break armor in team fights. As I said earlier, it makes dealing with armored players way easier. As Glooga Deco, for example, really struggles to fight armor since it doesn't have that tool at all. Like, it really just doesn't have that. And as I said earlier in the guide, Vglooga can use mine as bait so that people can push into it, since it's really good at being a distraction. So if you have at least 1 or 2 people push into you, those people are now damaged for 35 to 45, they're marked for a period of time, and your teammates could take advantage of the chip damage and the info, and deal with those people more accordingly than if they didn't have that damage and info. I also want to briefly touch on Inkjet and why it's good with Vglooga, since again, as I stated in the Inkmine section, Inkjet pairs really well with mine since it makes kills easier to confirmed, but it also helps Vglooga keep up the constant pressure it wants to keep up during a match from a longer range, and helps it clear areas of the map by either forcing people to move, as they don't want to get hit or damaged or die to the Inkjet, or you get the pick on them, and suddenly the enemy team is a disadvantage because they're actively being pushed by an Inkjet from whatever distance you want to use it from. And Inkjet's long threat range makes it just a threat almost at any part of the map because of how far it can reach, and again, that's a really potent tool to use on Vglooga, since we want to be keeping up the pressure at any state of the game and constantly be moving. The last thing I'm going to touch on with Inkmine and Jetpack is how they synergize, and while I've been stating a lot of reasons how they synergize in both of their respective sections, I just want to touch on that you can use Inkmines to make your Inkjet landings a little safer, as mining close to or around your Inkjet landing, or even on it, means that if people choose to be near that Inkjet landing, or around that area, they'll get marked and damaged by the Inkmine, which can alert you as the Inkjet user that there are people near your landing, or you're about to be camped, which means you still have Inkjet timing, or time on your Inkjet left. You can use that time to damage them, or at least kill them before they're going to be on your landing. Or if you don't have time to do that, you can call to your teammates that now that you can see that your landing is being camped and you need help. And with the chip damage and information Inkmine provides, it means that your entire team, or at least teammates that come to help you, are now aware of that, and they can use that chip damage to make cleanup a little faster. Which is, again, really good and really helps Vglooga just make its Inkjets a little safer, which isn't a luxury a lot of Inkjet weapons have. And as I stated earlier, you have more reliable damage combos, consistent chip damage, and you can be consistent aggro presence with the synergy that comes from Inkmine and Inkjet. So moving on from the main weapon something special, I'm next going to be touching on what abilities you want to be running on Vglooga. I'm going to be briefly going over why each of these abilities are good, but if you want learn more information about these abilities, then I'm going to have graphics up on screen that are going to be cycling as I'm talking, and you can take time to read the descriptions of each of these graphics for the abilities. So I really hope these help, and y'all can make some good builds with these. So the first 4 abilities I'm going to touch on are going to be Main Power-Up, Sub-Power, Stealth Jump, and Last Ditch Effort. With Main Power-Up, you're only going to need about a main of this. It'll boost Glooga's damage to 55.6, which means that if someone steps on the 45 damage hitbox of Inkmine, you can roll into turret mode and you can get an easy kill confirm. Next up is Sub-Power. You need to run about 3 subs to a main of this. This will buff Inkmine's tracking time, explosion radius, and paint. Though be warned, with Inkmine's buffed radius, it means that Inkmines have to be placed a little further apart since the radii are bigger and they can't overline too much, so be careful with how you place Inkmine and how much Sub-Power you stack. With Stealth Jump is a really good aggro ability and allows you to take risky jumps back into the map, though with the current meta we're playing, it generally is a little less effective, but it is still not bad if you want to get back into the map a little safer. But be warned, if people are closer to your jump, they will see it, and you can get camped and bomb spammed on your landing. And lastly, I'm going to touch on Last Ditch Effort. Last Ditch Effort is arguably one of the best abilities in the game right now, because it provides so much ink efficiency for so little. Especially in very fast modes like TC and Rainmaker, where you get pushed to 30 very easily, getting so much ability points out of Main Power, Ink Saver Sub, and Ink Recovery Up means Vglooga's mines will now cost significantly less, which is again really helpful since we want to be placing on the Ink mines as we push up and constantly applying pressure with them. So making mine combos less expensive and main weapon less expensive is really good, and that efficiency can really help Vglooga in a lot of situations. So I would highly recommend running LDE and TC just for the efficiency it provides alone. Alright, the next set of abilities I want to touch on are Comeback, Swim Speed, Quick Respawn, and Special Power Up. Comeback is a really helpful ability if you want to, since Vglooga wants to be an aggro skirmishy weapon. Comeback basically means when you die, you get mobility buffs when you come back, like swim speed and run speed. We're mainly looking at the swim speed here, since swim speed helps you get from point A to point B faster, and just really makes it easier to be fast and agile and mobile, which is what Vglooga wants. Which again, transitions us into swim speed. Which again, as I said, with Comeback, you're faster, you're more mobile, and you're agile, and that's just overall helpful, and just helps you get from point A to point B faster, helps you get the teammates faster, helps you get to frontline fights faster. It's just really strong. With Quick Respawn, since we're going to be a very aggro weapon and aiming to constantly apply pressure on the front lines, it means Vglooga is also probably going to die a fair bit, so stacking out some QR to make sure that your life isn't being thrown away all the time is good, since it means you respawn quicker, you can enter fights quicker again, and you can play a little more risky, which Vglooga wants to be able to do, since it wants to be able to apply so much pressure during a match. I would generally say for both QR and Swim Speed, with Swim Speed you only need about 1 to 2 subs. I wouldn't say you have to spec into it too hard, since you can run Comeback to get more of it. And with QR, I would really say you only need around a main and 2 subs, but if you want to stack more, you can go up to 2 mains of QR. And lastly, I want to touch on Special Power Up, which you only need about 2 subs of. Special Power Up is really good on Inkjet since it buffs its explosion radius and its duration. And with the slightly buffed explosion radius and the slightly buffed duration, it means we can use Inkjet for a little longer, and every time you shoot an Inkjet shot, the explosion radius is larger, which means it can throw people off since they're probably used to the shots being smaller, and means because of the larger radius, you're getting chip damage and paint on Inkjet from where your opponents probably wouldn't expect it to be. So that's again really good and really helpful. The last set of abilities I'm going to touch on in this section are Main Saver, Quick Super Jump, Special Saver, Ink Res, and Bomb Defense. Starting with Main Saver, you only need to run about a main of this. Main Saver is just so Vglooga can shoot a little more and have more bullets to work with, which is again really good since we want to be constantly applying pressure, and we can't do that if we don't have the ink in our tank to do so. So just having more ink in your tank to work around is really nice. Next up is Quick Super Jump. I would recommend about 1 to 2 subs of this, since you really, especially if you get in some pretty dicey situations with Vglooga, as you'll end up being aggro and skirmishy, if you get cornered and don't have a way out, you can rotate either back to spawn, or to teammates, or to a beacon, and having 1 to 2 subs of quick super jump makes this process a little faster. With Special Saver, I would say you either want to run about 1 to 2 subs of it, or you can run up to a main if you really want to commit to getting more Inkjets in a game. Special Saver means we generally are going to get more Inkjets in a game, since every time we die, a small percentage of our special isn't being lost anymore, meaning we're losing less percentage of our special overall. And that's really good for being able to apply pressure with Jetpack, do mine damage combos, and just overall be more of a nuisance. Next up is Res. I honestly am going to say that 2 subs of Ink Res are standard on any Glooga build, since Glooga really doesn't like paint, especially enemy paint, since it slows it down and makes it harder for it to push up, and enemy paint means people have more space to work around, so having 2 subs of Ink Res negates a lot of the damage that comes from standing in enemy ink, or get at least a decent chunk of it, and allows you to be more mobile throughout the map, which again is what we want. Last is Bomb Defense, and you're only in about a sub of this. A sub of Bomb Defense is pretty much standard in most gear builds, since it stops a lot of bombs from killing you from their max ranges, and it stops a lot of damage combos or bomb combos that a lot of weapons rely on. Like, for example, how Soda Slosher really wants to use Splat Bomb and a Slosh to do 30 and 70 damage and combo you. With a sub of Bomb Defense, you're basically immune to this combo and you won't die to it, which is again really good. So transitioning out of abilities, I want to next touch on what is Vglooga's goal in any given match. And I've been kind of saying it at this certain video, but Vglooga's main goal in the match is to be able to apply constant pressure through skirmishing and taking fights, whether it's with its main weapon, with Inkmine, or Jetpack. Inkmine lets it get info on the enemy team. You could set up Inkmine as bait to then punish people for holding forward into you, and then you can use those Inkmines as a way to damage combo into easier kills. Inkjet allows you to keep up aggression by applying pressure from rarely far away. You deal more chip damage, you break armors, and you clear people out of areas of the map that you want to push up to and take. And Vglooga mainly aims to either get important picks throughout a match, like picking off a player who's about to use armor before they use it, or before they have the special, or they're just like 90% to armor and you pick them before they use it. Or like, let's say you pick off someone before they can use a bomb rush on zone, or a section bomb rush on tower. And with its mobility, it's easily able to traverse around maps and get in and out of risky situations to be a distraction, skirmish, and help its team move up and take control of the map and the match. Alright, so I finally want to come back to the 3 terms I explained at the start of the video, that being neutral, advantage, disadvantage, and how to play each of them with Vglooga. So first off, starting off with neutral. With neutral, you really want to focus on getting into a position where people like to fight or poke from early on in the game. And for a good example of this is right wing or right mid on Starfish TC, and getting an early pick on someone poking and trying to get into mid is really helpful, since it's going to allow your team to get into mid and get advantage. So with advantage with Vglooga, you want to focus on moving ahead of the objective to start clearing space ahead of the objective. Mainly in the case of Vglooga, this is going to be tower, and you want to clear checkpoints and areas ahead of tower that your team wants to take, so your team can continue to push up and generally take space on tower control. And you want to be able to use your Inkjet and main weapon to move up and get picks to help make this happen. I also want to say and add this, but in advantage, you can go ahead and move forward and mine ahead of tower, so if anyone jumps on or into areas that tower is pushing, they can get chip damaged by Inkmines, so your teammates can have an easier time to deal with them. And lastly is disadvantage. If you aren't completely pushed out of the map, you can find a corner or a street or lane to set up in and put down Inkmines in that space. Doing this means that the enemy team will likely push into you to clean you up, which at this point you can hope to trade out with them or get information on what they're pushing. Even if they kill you, they're probably going to step on the Inkmines. But this stall can be made a lot easier and way more effective if you have Inkjet with you. As with Inkjet, you can double mine Inkjet the spot you're jetting from to apply pressure and force people back. Plus, with you actively popping a special, they're going to be forced to pay attention to you if they don't get rid of you. They can't just ignore you with Inkjet. So they're either going to want to get rid of you or try to move away from you, and if you get a pick, they're probably going to want to turn to get rid of you and remove you. So talking about maps now, I want to talk about what makes a good Glooga map. And a good Glooga map is generally a map that has a lack of bumps or hills, maps that have these flat plats, straight lanes, or a lot of open spaces to work with. These maps are really good for Glooga since it allows it to use its range to easily take up these spaces and put lots of pressure on them, plus it can cover itself with mine and Inkjet if someone chooses to push it. Rolls are really strong in these areas of the map since they cover a lot of distance and allow you to move around more freely to create space against opponents. But at the same time, Glooga really likes to play from corners or the pits of maps, since these areas of maps are really small and closed off, meaning that if people want to approach you, their options are going to be very linear, and that means Glooga can use its range to space them out and safely get picks from a corner that it can back itself into. So with me talking about maps, I'm going to flash some map mode combos that Vglooga loves to play on screen, and all of these maps and mode combos fit the criteria I've laid out in the map section, and really allow Vglooga to do its job effectively and well. Alright, so moving on from maps now, I want to talk about positioning briefly. Positioning correctly with Vglooga takes a little bit of time to learn, and also takes a lot of time to learn, but generally you want to be positioning yourself in places that the enemy team wants to push up or contest with their bodies. These are great places to place Inkmines or set up someone to bait into pushing you with mine, but on offense you generally want to position yourself slightly ahead of where the objective is being pushed, so you can be the aggro presence to start clearing areas, along with getting chip damage, information, and potentially picking off some players from the enemy team. Basically your standard Vglooga game plan. Okay, this is the last section before I close this video out, and it's possibly the biggest one. I'm going to be talking about weapons Vglooga likes to pair with and play around. So just like with the abilities section, I'm going to be placing graphics on screen as I briefly give an explanation of each weapon, and I really hope this helps y'all build comps around Vglooga and understand what it likes to play with and around. Alright, the first set of weapons I'm going to be talking about are Bamboo, Blob, CDS, and Junior. Bamboo helps Vglooga deal with chip damage and leaves a lot of opponents weak, even with just one shot. Since a lot of Bamboos run MPU, having opponents constantly weak and afraid of getting one-tapped allows Vglooga to play really well for the pressure Bamboo exerts and get back into the map and set up. Blob puts out constant chip damage with its blobs, it paints the map, and exerts a lot of pressure, which again helps Vglooga get back to the map, which it really needs, and is a really good aggro pair with it because of the chip damage. And Blob also really likes to play around Vglooga's main weapon damage and how much damage mine does, since it makes killing people easier and you need less blobs to kill them. With CDS, it's just another good aggro weapon to pair with Vglooga. CDS can help Vglooga get in the map by creating openings for it through a really good stall potential with dodge rolls, rain, and bombs. And Junior gives Vglooga a really good amount of paint to work with, and Double Bomb Junior is a really good way to help Vglooga in its own fights, since Bot Bomb does damage, it paints, and most importantly, it forces people to move and respect the bomb's hitbox, which helps Vglooga deal with things a little easier. Next set of weapons we're going to be talking about are K-Luna, Silver and Bronze Arrow Spray, Mini, and Brush. So with K-Luna, this might seem like an odd pick, but you can spec into throwing long-range fizzies with some power-up, and throwing as many rains as you possibly can, and with this long-range paint, chip damage, and pressure, it can assist Vglooga's fights, give it a lot of paint to work with, and damage people. Silver, Bronze Arrow, Mini, and Brush are all kind of in the same boat, as they all provide a lot of paint for Vglooga to work with, and each have their own respective way of getting it back to the map with their specials. The arrows have Curling Bomb Rush and Booyah Bomb, Mini has missiles and burst bombs, and it also appreciates the chip damage Vglooga does, because it allows him to get easier kills, and it also helps Vglooga with chip through burst bomb. And then Brush, like I said with the others, paints really well, but also Brush is an amazing weapon that helps split attention of the enemy team by running around and actively being a distraction, and has really good stalling tools. And Brush paints Vglooga in, and allows it to get a chance to get back in the map by splitting attention. Alright, so the last set of weapons I'm going to be talking about are both variants of Splash, both Eliter variants, Tent, and K-Dynamo. Both Splashes paint amazingly well, which is great for Vglooga. V-Splash has Toxic Mist for slowing down opponents and holding choke points, and Splash Neo helps by putting out constant chip damage with burst bombs and its own bomb rush. E-Liter has great long-range pressure as a charger, and this gets better if the E-Liter player is aggressive, and people are afraid of either your laser or wanting to push the E-Liter, and Vglooga can easily play around that. Tent may not paint as well as Junior or Splash, but it has really good re-entry power with bubbles or Curling Bomb Rush and its own shield deployment. Vglooga can play around these tools to get back into the map and then abuse the chip damage they do to get easier picks. And playing around Tent Shield gives you extra protection and a tool to push up with. So K-Dynamo is last, and it has really great painting like other weapons I've mentioned, and with running Tenacity on it, it consistently putting out Booyahs, which, as we established earlier with Bronze. Arrow, it's a great re-entry tool. And Dynamo also covers under ledges, and that's really helpful for Vglooga to drop and get back into the map. With all this information that I've given, I really hope that this guide helps people understand Vglooga better and shows that it's not one of the worst weapons in the game. As consistently, it's been one of the most slept on weapons in Splatoon 2, and in a lot of tier lists and weapon rankings that have made through this game's life, Vglooga has always been placed somewhere near the bottom as a weapon that can't function or can't be used properly. I not only disagree strongly with this, but I personally believe that it's the strongest Glooga right now, next to Vglooga. I hope that this guide and the showcase of the weapon strengths and how it plays shows people this weapon is far from useless, and with the right mentality and understanding of the game and the weapon, it can work amazingly well. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you later. And if you liked what you saw, consider liking, leaving a comment, or subscribing. Again, thank you all so much for your support and encouraging me to make this. I really hope this helps people with Vglooga and understanding it. Bye bye.